Howdy. Hello. It is the Wavetable live thing, episode 3. It's Wednesday, the 17th of November, no less. It's 12 o'clock Eastern time, 12:02 because I started a bit late because that's what happens sometimes. 9 o'clock on the Pacific coast, 5 o'clock in the UK, 6 o'clock in Europe, and some other times in other places. Welcome along. My name is Howard. I'm your intrepid host for what the working title of this thing, we're calling it the Groove Box. It is Wavetable's little groove box of tricks. This is the third episode. We're doing every 2 weeks where we're getting into some goodness for you to learn how to do new things in cool ways. We're going to do 2 things in each of these sessions. They're about 30 minutes or so each. First thing we do is we get into how to craft and share compelling stories to build your business, your projects, your career, your community. We talk about stories. We also talk about how you can design and deliver engaging workshops, conferences, courses, and other things that humans do together that are of a non-explicit nature. That's what we do in these 2 things. We are Wavetable. We create unique experiences rooted in learning, discovery, and community. Here's the little sales pitch. I'll keep it really short because you're not here for that. The first thing we do is we help companies with talent. Attracting talent, developing talent, connecting talent. We create onboarding programs, we do apprenticeships, we build leadership development programs, we make offsites. Oh, offsites. That sounds somewhat familiar. Other kinds of human gatherings. So that's one thing we do. We work with talent and companies. The second thing we do is working with fans, audiences, customers, communities to help them engage, grow, and lots of good things like that. We build workshops, we create conferences, we create social impact and community initiatives, we build brand platforms. Many, many exciting things, all rooted in learning, discovery, and community and connection. That's what we do. If you want to learn about how we can do stuff together, we can help you create something magical. You can email me. That's me right there, howard@wavetable.net. All right, that's the end of the commercial stuff. We don't want any more of that. Stuff that's not here for that. This is vibes only. All right. Today, 3 things. 3 is the magic number. We're going to talk about hot and cool, which is our regular series of things that are hot and things that are cool. We're going to talk a bit of our Q&A. We have one question of today. I'm going to do a little bit on the Q&A, just a tiny bit, a couple of top line bits just to kind of get the scene set. And then I'm very excited to say a new bit of this Groovebox regular episode is we're going to be doing a back-to-back, a B2B, just like the best DJs going B2B. We have a very special guest coming in to go back-to-back with me riffing on the Q&A topic. This is a world first, a Wavetable first. We have never done someone else in the room. It may not work. I may end up kicking her out of the room or something else going wrong or technical issues, but I can see her in the green room. I can see her waiting. So hurdle 1 has been overcome. All right, and that rhymed. Okay, let's get into it. Hot and cool. Q&A. Today's question is all about offsites. And then we're going to get into the back-to-back. All right. Hot and cool. Hot and cool. Why are we talking about hot and cool? Last time I mentioned this guy, Marshall McLuhan. Interesting chap. Medium and the message and all that. He also coined this idea of hot media and cool media. This is in the 60s, but actually it's very relevant today. Very relevant for learning as well. Briefly, here's what he meant. Hot media, engaging one sense completely. So there's various types of media that engage one sense completely, but they're very restricted to a particular time, a particular place. One example could be a movie. If you go in the cinema, the movie engages you fully. That's hot media. Cool media, on the other hand, maybe more low def on the whole, engaging several senses less completely, but it gives the viewer, the experiencer, more opportunity to maybe interact, explore, consider, think about it. So we like these ideas at Wavetable. We believe that hot and cool can be utilized together to create something that is, well, hopefully more than warm, hopefully more than lukewarm. Let's look at today's hot and cool. We have a couple of examples of what's hot and what's cool, stuff that we've seen, stuff that we think is interesting that we'd like to share. Today's hot one comes from Wired magazine. This is a very nice little web series they've done called 5 Levels. The latest one, which is here, is on machine learning. So Wired are getting experts from various fields, sustainability, physics, astrophysics, machine learning, to explain what they do in 5 different ways. They explain it to a child, they explain it to a teen, They explain it to a college student, they explain it to a grad student, and then they explain it to an expert. We think this is great. It's a super simple way of communicating, a super simple content series. But more importantly, I think probably the world needs more of this. We need ways to explain things to different people in different ways so it lands with them. As a quick side note, I really should have got my hair cut this week. It's horrible. I mean, it's a disgrace, frankly. I should have got my beard trimmed. My parents are in town, and when I was going to go to get my hair cut, my dad then asked me, "So, this Bitcoin thing, can you explain this to me?" 2.5 hours later, I'm still talking about crypto and Web3 and like what a blockchain, and I feel like I've actually got more gray hair, and my hair even grew even more in the time I was talking to him. So I didn't get my hair cut, but I did experience this way of explaining things to different people. Helps me learn as well. So love this. 5 Levels by Wired Magazine. Boom. That's today's hot. And as for machine learning, I mean, I still can't handle the machine learning algorithms anyway. Thanks, Jack. All right. The cool. All right. We got to blow our own little sort of French horn section here. We're working on something that we hope is a little cool. We're working on a little trends report. It's called Edutainment 3.0. We're very excited about it. It's currently in development. You can head to that link right there. Where's the camera? That way. There we go. wavetable.net/edutainment. You can add your email address and we will send you the report when it's done. This sounds hot because it's just a trends report, or is it? No, it has workshops, it has interactive stuff, it has coaching sessions, all kinds of magic in there. That is what's cool in our world right now. Hopefully engaging a few senses in different ways. All right. And also we're doing something a little bit jazzy. We're doing a bit of, speaking of which, Web3. We're doing a Web3 NFT little bit with it as well, which is top secret for now. I promise there will not be just a load of crypto punks involved in this. It's not about that. It's not about that. But hopefully it'll be worth millions in the future. Can you imagine the Wavetable Trends Report? Worth millions on the open internet. We shall see. Anyway, that was hot and cool. Let's get into Q&A. I'm going to move myself across. I'm going to move these slides across. There we go. That's a bit better. Made myself a bit smaller. No one needs a full Howard in their life. That's a bit much. Q&A. All right. This is the juicy bit of today's Wavetable Groove Box. Let's talk about the Q&A. Today's question is all about offsites. I should say these are real questions from real humans. We haven't just like made these up, like walking around the park and just thought, oh, wouldn't it be great if we pretended that someone actually asked this? These are actually real questions. Redacted the people involved for, I don't know, like they say in movies, no animals were harmed in the making of this for confidentiality reasons. But here is the question from today that's come up. We've heard this actually a bunch in the last couple of weeks. That's an amazing typo by me right there. How I can design, whatever, you get the idea. How can I design a successful offsite that embeds our vision and gets the team excited, motivated, and primed to think differently? I haven't done this for a while. No, a lot of us haven't. A successful in-person offsite particularly. Haven't done this for a while. Offsites are super interesting. Sometimes they're for teams, sometimes for a whole company. Some people even do them kind of with clients, like sort of customer advisory board type stuff. Many different flavors, many different reasons, many different goals. They sound easy on the surface, but they're not easy. They're actually very easy to get wrong and to get the kind of tone wrong and for them to fall kind of flat. Today's guest is going to be getting into some guidelines for greatness on that in a minute, but we're going to start with just my very top line thoughts on this before she comes in to drop us some bombs of wisdom. All right, start here. First time. So many people are gathering together for the first time. If you're doing an offsite for your team, for a department, for the whole company, it's very likely going to be the first time coming up now. I think considering that is really, really important. So when people are coming together for the first time in a while, we need to really think about how does that feel for people? Where are they showing up from? What's been going on in their lives? Also, some people are meeting for the very first time, as in they have not been together. They have never met before. Some companies have been completely remote. There have been many new hires who haven't met together for the first time. Maybe a CEO is new. Maybe they're meeting the team for the first time. There's a lot of first times. There's obviously things around post-COVID or whatever post means. COVID restrictions. Well, it's our first time getting together. It's my first time coming to this place. I've never been to this city before. There's a lot of first time. So I think thinking about this first time and trying to kind of empathize and put yourself in the shoes of other people who are there for the first time is a good start point. I'm just going to jump through these sort of 4 or 5 bits quickly, and then we're going to dive in deeper in our back-to-back. All right. Second thing is outcomes. Arguably, I should put this third, but I'm going to do it here because, hey, it's here. The what's it for? Oh, my goodness. The what's it for? I think it was Seth Godin's email this morning, actually, that talked about the importance of the what's it for. What's it for is crucial. Now, with workshops and education programs and things like that, the what's it for is absolutely essential. But I think with offsites, it's easy for us to sort of think, well, it just feels like, yeah, we're just getting it together. But we need to be clear on what's it for. It's really easy for us to let that slip, and we can end up losing the thread of what it is actually for. What's the balance between business, brand, mindset, humanity, connection, vibes, innovation, like figuring out the what's it for? If we don't, we can end up with a kind of a confected, congealed mess of a session, and we don't want that. That's bad. So the what's it for is key. Even if we think, oh, it's a lighter kind of thing, we still need to have clear outcomes. All right, next thing, number 3 is the theme and the narrative. Again, maybe you don't think there is a theme of this thing. It's just that we're getting together for the first time this year, or we're getting together at the end of the year, or whatever it is. But I reckon there is probably a theme somewhere. There may be a sub-theme, there may be like not a big overarching thing, but there'll probably be some sort of narrative, some sort of theme, something going on. Now, maybe, yes, if you're all going bowling together, maybe there isn't like a really amazing story arc there. But even so, if you are going bowling together, knowing where to place that activity in the day, in the 2 days that you're together, really matters. You've got to know where to place it. And if you don't have a theme or a narrative, you just end up shoving stuff into weird positions. It doesn't feel right. An analogy is this with a DJ, talking about back-to-back. DJs who are playing all night, you then have to place your big records really, really carefully. If you're playing a 1-hour set, you can just go bang, 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 don't care. If we're coming together for a longer period of time, you have to place stuff more carefully. You have to be a bit more of a curator, a bit more of a selector. The theme and the narrative matters. Even if you think we're just going bowling or paintballing or drinking, you still got to place it carefully. So there's going to be a theme, some sub-themes, some narrative to think about. All right. Number 4, activities. All right. Whenever it comes to like building workshops, we always talk about don't do slides first. Please don't do slides first. Also, don't do activities first. It's really easy to start with activities because they're fun and they're interactive and everything else. But we want to think about those outcomes and those what's it fors and the narrative and the themes first. But when we are thinking about activities, a good start point, because it can feel like there's so many things we could do, but what should we do? A really good opening question for ourselves or for people we're working with is like, do these activities feel right or wrong? So one way we've tackled this is like, here's a big list of activities. What's the vibe? Do these feel like they fit? Do they feel wrong? Does this feel incongruent? Does this feel like off base? Would we not include this? Does this feel out of whack? It's a really good start point. Like, does this activity actually feel like it should even be in consideration? Vibe wise, does it fit? So don't start with the activity straight away. But when you do get to that point, start with that first question to slim them down, because I find people can get really overwhelmed with, oh, there's 100 different things we could do. Just start with, does this feel right? All right, a couple of quick things, and then we'll go back with our wonderful special guest. All right, second to last bit from me, stretching. I haven't done much stretching. I have an osteopath appointment on Monday, and she is going to be very upset with me because I haven't done really any stretching of late. But in this context, we're talking about stretching ourselves. What someone said to me last week, which I loved, was the idea of the widescreen version of ourselves. So all of us have kind of been like this for a long time. We haven't really been able to stretch, as it were. So what does the widescreen kind of stretched version, so to speak, this is coming from a 6'6" person, stretched version of ourselves feel like? And what I mean by that is the ability to express. Do we want calm? Do we want quiet? Do we want to stretch and push? Or do we just want to kind of have more of a relaxing feel where we've already stretched? And this idea of what is our widescreen version, like the full version of ourselves, show up like within this gathering together, I think is a really interesting question. So I love this idea of sort of stretching widescreen versus this kind of rigid, difficult feel that a lot of us have had when we're doing stuff online. So thinking about what kind of space this is, are we allowing people to stretch? Do we want them to stretch? Do we want them to just relax in a more sort of meditative yoga vibe? Or are we looking for them to do full hit workout? Stretching. All right. Last bit from me, and then we will move on. This is always a thing. This is always a thing with any gathering of any people. If it's a workshop, if it's online, if it's offline, we are probably going to have some cynics. We will probably have some enthusiasts. This is probably more of a spectrum than a slash. We'll probably have a spectrum of where people are coming in from, unspoken objections, how much they want to be there, have they been mandated, all of that good stuff. But just as a primer, it's really worth us thinking about, where do we think people are landing? Again, this is where people are coming in from. Are they coming in from I could have done this before, I don't fancy this, or I'd rather be at home? Are they coming in from I can't wait to dig in? And it's really worth us thinking about, how many of each group have we got? Where are they at? What's meaning that they want to come in like this? What makes them feel this way? What can we do to help them with that? What can we maybe do to help them feel more comfortable and more integrated into the thing we're building? So at least knowing if we have cynics, if we have enthusiasts, we're going to get into some more tactical stuff of how we can manage and work with and help and support those people in a bit. But that is my quick bit. I'm just going to whiz through these 6. So I had the first time. We know it's the first time. Matters that it's the first time. We have to think about that a lot, especially now. Second thing, what the heck is this thing for? It has to have a what's it for, or it ain't worth doing. Related to that, there needs to be a theme, a narrative. We have to have something going on, that things need to be placed in the right positions. If we're doing activities, we're probably going to be doing something. A good start point is like, does this even feel like it should be in consideration or not? Because we can get a bit overwhelmed with the amount of stuff we could do. Then it's the stretch. What does the widescreen stretched full in-person version of ourselves feel like? And do we even want it to be like a fully stretched, intense experience, or something more chill? And lastly, thinking about cynics, enthusiasts, confused, uncertains, not sures. Where's everyone landing on the spectrum, and how can we support them with this thing we're building? All right. That's enough, Howard. Right, we're going to move into some back-to-back. I'm going to try and make this work. I hope it will. I'm going to take the slides off, move myself into a little position. Sorry, just got to sort of refine my face, which is, it's a lifetime's work, frankly. All right. Special guest in the house. I'm hoping I can bring her in. There she is. It's Katie. Katie, hello. Are you there?
Oh, I'm here. Hi.
You are here. It's lovely to have you. Thank you for taking the time. Let's just start. Please introduce yourself. Who are you? Where are you? What are you drinking right now as well?
Coffee.
Good.
I'm Katie Drakey. I'm located in Portland, Oregon. I'm an independent consultant. I have a little agency that's called Drakey. Amazing branding, my last name. And I work a lot in brand innovation, brand strategy, building teams, expressing teams, and also brands, living brands. And one of my favorite areas is around the elasticity of time, just kind of stretching out the time horizon that we are comfortable in thinking out or traditionally thinking about.
Cool. I want to talk about that quite a bit. I love that concept. First, I think it's worth sharing that you have done, and one of the reasons I wanted to have you in today is that you have been a participant, you've been an organizer, you've been a designer, a leader, a facilitator. You've kind of seen it from all this stuff, whether it's offsites, workshops, any other kind of magical things like this, from a lot of different angles. Do you want to sort of share a little bit about some of the stuff you've done or seen in the past?
Yeah, you bet. I have one of those backgrounds where I've been on multiple sides of the camera. So I have about, 10, 13, 14 years of agency work and independent consultancy work, where I've been like the advisor, the support mechanism behind brands. And then I've got another 9, 10 years inside the corporate environment at both Nike and Adidas, where I've been participants on internal workshops. I've organized internal workshops. I've co-organized internal workshops with external partners, like just all the different ways you can do it. Big summits, hundreds of people flying in from out of town, or hey, we have this new team of 10 people. We need to figure out who we are, the work that we do, and kind of the workshop or the kickoff for that team is like such a critical foundational step. It's part of the lore and legend of how the team begins. It's kind of that first genesis seed of where we go, and so it can be really intimate, but really powerful, and all the things in between. Um, and I'm really familiar with how you can do your double darndest to like pin it all down and get it organized, and things can happen in the room. They usually do. Actually, it's one of the things to plan for.
Yeah.
Some of those cynics can get out of hand. Some of those enthusiasts can, think they're helping, but actually they're going off the rails. There's all kinds of different dynamics to try to, anticipate. And that's really the best you can do is anticipate, even in the 5 things you just mentioned. When you think about the spectrum of cynics to enthusiasts as like extremes at either end, the things that you do in those first 4 points, recognizing that they were getting together after either a time apart or have never met, haven't ever met before ever, recognizing that you got to tee up what this thing is for. It can't just be, I'm a leader in an organization and I've been told by my senior leaders that once a year we have to get together. And so therefore now I'm checking the box. Like that feels like a checkbox. I've been to checkbox workshops. They start to feel like forced fun, or they start to feel like, a death march or something. So what is it for? Make it about something if it isn't already about something, which then leads to the narrative and the story and the theme and the placement of the different activities. I like the way you describe that. Do you use the bowling as the icebreaker at the beginning where nobody knows who they are? And so now they're doing this weird activity that nobody's really all that great at. And so it's an equalizer. Or do you leave it for the end of the night when people are drinking and they've already met each other and they've been working together, and now it's about teamwork and it's about cheering each other on and high fives? It could that one thing could do different jobs, And I love the full selves part, bringing your whole self. I had no idea that you're as tall as you are,
Yes,
and I've actually had that
it's
happen.
hidden by the internet, unfortunately.
I know, like I've actually had that happen. I went to a workshop a couple weeks ago where I actually flew for the first time after not traveling at all for business. And so I was a little, I don't know, wound up because of that whole part of it. And I got in the room with many of my clients who I didn't realize had never met each other. So the first, 10, 15 minutes of the introduction, which my colleague and I had like very highly orchestrated, was blown up immediately with people being like, oh, and I don't know you were so tall, and like meeting each other, bosses meeting their reports and all of these things. That can be quite a trip. And you can play with it. You could make it really playful. You could actually build a whole module around it. What did
Yeah, and
you
I think
think you were?
that gets to space as well, right? So
Yeah,
it's easy to design where you don't have any room for that, but then
yeah.
suddenly people are, oh my goodness, you're tall, or you're this person, or whatever the
You
thing
could
is, or
even
there's like certain trigger points or ignition points where stuff happens that you're not expecting, and if you've designed too rigid, you can end up, oh, that wasn't the plan.
yeah. You you could just call it the unboxing, and it's
Yeah,
like a module that happens where everybody kind of unboxes each other, introduces each other like you would a fabulous, order that came online to your house, and now you're unboxing it and, taking a closer look. It's a pretty cool phenomenon. And then, then if you anticipate each one of those things through the lens of someone who's like sad trombone won't want guy in the corner who's just checking his phone, and then through the people who are like, I'm so psyched that they're kind of in danger of taking all the oxygen out of the room, not letting everyone speak, not letting everyone participate because they're so wound up, and trying to make sure that those folks stay focused, and then the other people put down their phone. And generally, if you can get everybody in the bell curve, you're doing great. There's always people who want to pull out. Some of it is just personalities and wiring. Some people excel in group situations, some don't. Some people are aware of this, some aren't. So, as a facilitator and a leader who's putting all these chemistry sets together in a room with an agenda, it's just good to be mindful of all that stuff.
I love that. Yeah, the chemistry sets together can combust or create magic or both,
Yeah.
depending on what
Yes,
happens at different times,
it's true.
and also it's
It's
art
true.
and science. So
I think the
I
only
love
other
that.
thing I'd layer into all of that is some of the wild cards that I've witnessed, which are international groups. if you're a global team and you're trying to get together people who don't necessarily speak the same language, if there's a need for translators, taking into account expectations of different cultures. When are we going to eat? How long is it going to take to eat? What does it mean to team bond? Japanese people have a different feeling about that than Italians. Like, it's just really just having a think about all of that, making sure that everyone gets a chance to feel at ease, at least part or most of the time. Stretching is a part of being a part of a global brand. So, that's also part of the job description. If you're on a global organization, is that you will experience some discomfort and it's part of your growth, and that should be anticipated, but it shouldn't feel terrible, and so the international thing, time zones, and if you're getting people together in different time zones, that where is the really heavy thinking part of the day, making sure that happens when people aren't jet lagged. You can stick it in the morning or stick it in the afternoon, whenever the time is that people are sharper. Yeah.
So speaking of which, my dad is over from the UK, and my mum as well. And my dad is currently, I don't think it's picking up on the mic, putting together our baby's new crib, because my DIY is terrible. I waited until day 3 when he wasn't jet lagged to be like, right, go on, it's time now.
Yeah.
So he's currently banging away in the bedroom. So I think that the jet lag thing applies to any heavy work. Like if we're doing any strategy work, or something that's maybe an alignment thing that's a more challenging conversation about team dynamics, people aren't going to want to do that when they've just landed off an 11-hour flight. And it's easy to forget this stuff, right? Because we often will design for the people that are in front of us, or we project ourselves into it. And so, yeah, I think 100% being mindful of different cultures where people are coming from matters a lot.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then the aids that can go along with that is, it's actually one of the points I wanted to bring up later. We can talk about it deeper in a minute, but artifacts that I've been to workshops where I have been so woefully jet lagged that I really struggled to remember some of the important parts. I've done things like, and you've probably done this as well, taking pictures of the slides up on the wall because I'm afraid I'm going to forget them and I'm too tired to even take notes. So there's ways that you can facilitate the memory of the team by giving them all the same artifacts, equalizing. If someone really struggles with English and the whole thing's been done in English, give them a chance to go home and translate and really understand the material by capturing the critical seeds in a document or in a set of cards or in a small film or whatever it is that gives people something to take home as an artifact.
I think even just a few of the things you mentioned, naturally unbiased, highlight this stuff is not easy. It's not, oh yeah, we can whack together this thing in 3 hours. It's a craft, and there's a lot of design and consideration and development that needs to go into it. However, I hope the empowering message is that if you take the time to think through this stuff, it can be done. You can create something that is really great and inclusive.
Yeah. You can create absolute magic with these things. I've seen and been a part of several that have been some of the most memorable experiences in my working life. And then you go to somewhere you're I don't even know why we're here. This is someone just basically cobbled together a bunch of disconnected moments in time. I don't it doesn't, the sense making is hard, and you don't want to put the work of sense making on the group. That's supposed to be on the leader and their cohort of organizers that they may or may not need pull it together, but you should be able to experience offsite as a participant and just absorb, not have to struggle to understand how does all this go together.
And I think what you touched on around the sense making thing, people are tired, or whether it's that day or generally. And I think that kind of gets us to an in-person thing, particularly.
Yeah.
It needs to be valuable, because a leader will look at it, okay, there's a cost associated with this we didn't have last time. People have got used to being at home. Some people are going to be really ready to go in person, but many others are maybe well, I've got kids, or I'm comfortable working from home. It's a commitment to go, and maybe considerations around COVID.
Yeah.
It's a commitment to go and do something in person. So I'm curious, this time around, whether we're talking about, recording this in November, whether it's December, January, or, into the next 12 months or so, what's different when it comes to creating these things? What are you noticing, and how are you sort of thinking about this?
Yeah, a lot of what I'm noticing is kind of hovering around two specific pieces. I'm sure there's more, but these ones are jumping right out. One is around different COVID protocols in different parts of the world. So, in particular, if you're organizing a global team offsite, um, one of my clients was struggling to actually find a location where everyone could actually fly to get into the country without having to be in quarantine so that they could
Mhm.
actually get to work and also provide some safety to the folks that were traveling to make sure that he wasn't asking people to go above and beyond, a reasonable comfort level. So there's also different protocols that people have gotten comfortable with during the pandemic. In the US, like where I live in Portland, in my particular community, there's a lot of open space. So people are out walking without masks, although I think maybe a year ago we were still walking outside with masks because we were still learning about the virus. But at the moment we've got some comfort level and we've got a lot of people participating in putting on a mask when they go inside. But I know that that's not the same everywhere in the world, even in the United States. I just went on a trip to Utah in which there isn't a mask mandate, and I nearly had a heart attack when I went into a coffee shop and nobody was wearing a mask. And I was like, "What's happening here?" Because I had gotten so accustomed to what was happening in Portland. So if you imagine all of these people coming together, you know, made even more dramatic if people are coming from international places, their understanding of what normal or what safe is are gonna be different. So organizing a shared idea of what normal and safe is during this
Mm.
time is gonna take another layer of planning that we haven't had to think about, a lot. So this is really important to get right. We don't want people to feel like their health or their wellness is being put into danger. We don't totally know all the cases of like all the family members or health concerns that are very serious. We don't necessarily know. We might know. Have any of our team members lost family members to this disease? And it might be a very emotional thing to consider getting on a plane or going in a room full of other people. So that's one that just takes a
Mhm.
lot. You got to think about it. Is this the right time to get everybody together first and foremost, and then how do we do it? The second one is I think it's really healthy, and it's also one that I haven't come up against, and I'm really glad that it's coming up. Is one of my clients is a new parent. It's their second child, but a new parent again, and was very sensitive when he was getting his team together for the first time as a new leader, that people who had children or other family-based responsibilities for spouse or elderly parent or whatever the case may be, that they felt like being asked to travel away for a week was not going to put them at a financial disadvantage and cause additional stress. And so he actually built into his planning a financial stipend that was being given. So if you needed to fly a parent in from out of town, for example, to look after your child, some people are single parents, if they needed to hire a nanny or if they needed to make some sort of arrangements, or even if they had a pet, what are these arrangements this person needs to make so that they can show up without any emotional baggage or any concern, calm and feeling like they were ready to really get into the work. That was something I hadn't seen before, and I thought was really
Mm.
quite forward thinking. And it made me realize there's probably other things that we have taken for granted for our employees in the past. And this is an opportunity, especially if you're a new leader, to really express the values of the team and give the brand a little bit of shine. That we expect you to show up and work, but we're not going to expect you to also bleed or take on additional financial burden for this. Like, this is a fair shake. Um, those two are the ones that have really jumped out at me as being like wholly unique for the moment that we're in, and great opportunities to actually build connective tissue with your team and set a baseline for like what this team believes and how they work.
Love both of those. I think they're very pertinent now, but I hope some of the elements of that will carry forward into whatever's next as well. The
Yeah.
kind of the more accessibility and considerations for where people are coming in from and their previous experience and everything else.
Yeah.
So one word you mentioned in there was comfort,
Yeah.
and something we've talked about before is like adrenaline versus comfort.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about that, like that balancing act of like what, and this gets to the what's it for a little bit. Can you add a bit on how do we think about adrenaline versus comfort and sort of navigating that space when we're thinking about designing this thing for people.
Yeah. It feels to me like if I were to take all of the sort of collective workshop offsite interactive experiences I've had over the culmination of my whole career, I would say that probably 70, nearly 80% of them were about pouring adrenaline on people and getting them inspired and getting them pumped and, getting them, yeah, like, let's just light this fire and really, and kind of like impressing them and making them feel important and like all of those things that are kind of agitators or lifters, like you're infusing a team with energy. But having gone through what we've all gone through the last 2 years, I'm having more conversations with my clients about um, not the opposite, but maybe like a different kind of energy, which is a little bit more about a steady energy, a safe place where people can bring their whole unboxed selves into the room after having been boxed, for almost 2 years now. And also a place that has some thinking time and some solitude. I have been on certain offsites where I come back exhausted. Like we have just been go, 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 go. There may have been a time change there that we have been like agendized back to back, late dinners, early starts, and a lot of sort of like um, events where they say it's optional, but it's not. And so there's like tension, social tension, political tension that are sometimes built into these things that are just they're hard to avoid completely. I had just one really in the last couple of years where actually the leader said to us as the team, I actually really hate those kinds of offsites and I really struggle with those kinds of offsites. And so as the leader who gets to finally choose what my offsite's going to be like, I'm going to actually architect it a little bit more like me. And hopefully you like it. It'll be a little bit different. We will have moments of, energy and activity, but I want to provide you time to rest and to have space to think. And you can do with that time what you want. You can go to a museum, or you can go for a run, or you can meet with your teams and you can work on something if you want, but you can also have a nap, or you can think, or you can, solve a personal problem. So that was a first for me in a very long time. And I personally really enjoyed how different that felt after so many feeling really revved up. So I think, yeah, I mean, that's also an opportunity to kind of express yourself as a leader, as you're kind of setting a tone. And also, it was useful as a foil to maybe what the brand typically does. Like, I've worked at a lot of sport brands. So there's typically a lot of, you always have to pack a workout gear in your suitcase whenever you're going somewhere, because there will always be some sort of activity that we all have to do together. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not so great. It was nice to have sort of like an anti, it's like a foil to what is normal, and it kind of sends another signal that this team is unique. We do things in a unique way, and it kind of sets the stage for the way that the work's going to get done.
I like that a lot, and it's also making me think of my osteopath again and my lack of stretching. You were talking about guilty. I'm going to do some stretching after this, I promise.
Guilty.
So getting into like the stuff, and you mentioned that artifact, and I love that term.
Yeah.
And I think we sort of talk about ingredients as well.
Yeah.
And I touched on it in my riff at the beginning. When you think about like the ingredients or the artifacts, how do you start sort of adding those or thinking about what they could or should be? Because there's a lot of different things people can start bringing in. And so how do you kind of see that either working most effectively when you've been a participant, or when you're guiding or creating these things? How do you think about ingredients and artifacts?
Yeah. I think some of the key ingredients are things like location, where, because I think it's just there needs to be a why behind every choice. Why are we getting together in this city, state, country, building? The stage has been set. And just like any play, like, is it a theater in the round, or is it is it an auditorium? Is it a very small, intimate venue? All those things communicate something. So I think location and setting, um, some of those things are driven by budget and availability, obviously, and sometimes you get forced to work with things you don't really want to. But I think when you start your planning, you want to start from what you want and then make concessions as you go, but don't make concessions before you have to. So, start with what you want and choose your setting. Um, don't underestimate the power of food and drink to either enhance or detract from what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Um, there's also, there's dietary needs of people. There's the cultural expectations of people. Alcohol can be a really great lubricant, and it can also be like a total problem. And so, like, finding the right time and the right way to make these things available um, are all about team building, and also about like keeping people refreshed and energized and inspired. Food can be very inspiring. In fact, I went to one offsite in which the food basically was the workshop. We were it was like the analogy for every question we were asking. We were solving it around a table on which the food was basically the metaphor, and it was incredibly interactive and cool. And so sometimes you can actually make the food the programming.
Mm.
And then I think it's just like the cadence and the sequencing of things. If it's a multiple day thing, there's things that you will absolutely have happen on day 1 so that you can get to something by day 3. And there's a building, and you have to think of it like a song. There's an intro, there's a riff that kind of gets you into it. There's usually some sort of like icebreakery type thing. We usually called it breaking bread. Like, you just got to get people around a table breaking bread together, and magical things happen. And so oftentimes at offsites, we'd arrive in the afternoon, in the evening, and have a dinner together before we would even begin with the first slide presentation the next morning, because the breaking bread the day before just really lubricates everything else. So it's the cadence and the sequencing. You don't want to feel rushed. But I also have been to workshops where the discussion was so necessary, and we let it protract and kind of destroy the agenda. And then we all like linked arms, high-fived, and said, okay, now we're going to really dig into this last module. We're going to do it fast together. But because we had given ourselves the time to have the necessary conversation, we were ready to like dig in. So you kind of let things ebb and flow. You got to have an agenda so people can know what to expect, but you also have to give people the expectations that things will shift around as things naturally occur. Yeah, I think those are some really key critical ingredients. If you don't think about those, you're gonna have struggle to make some of the other decisions, I think.
Yeah, and I'm going to try and I'm going to end up, pardon the pun, butcher the food analogy a bit. And that there are some key ingredients that you need for a recipe, and then like there's other stuff you can add, or maybe add a sprinkle or substitute if you want to or need to. But there's always going to be a few things in any recipe that you have to have in there, otherwise it just ain't going to work. And so I think the same is very true here.
Yeah.
Last couple of things, because speaking of which, it's nearly my lunchtime. You've got me hungry thinking about some food workshop. Like I'm into that. I wanted to ask you about decisions and like commitments.
Yeah.
Because I feel like when we last spoke, you had some interesting viewpoints on that, because there's a lot of kind of fatigue, but also within these environments, we're going away to do a thing. Decisions do tend to matter. Can you talk about that a bit, and how you think about are people committing to something or not, and how should teams or leaders think about what they're kind of creating and getting to at the end of the period together?
I've been to workshops where it was like the emphasis was on the work. We are going away as a team to land our 2022 strategy. It's going to take 2 days. There's going to be a little fun sprinkled in, but this is a workshop. Like, that's the emphasis. But I've also been to workshops where our team hasn't had any time away from the office in like a year. Or in this case, we haven't been unboxed together in nearly 2 years. And the emphasis is actually on the cohesion, the connective tissue, the alignment, the spiritual center, And yes, there's going to be some work we're going to do as well. We need, you can imagine a senior leader putting one of these together, needing to justify the budget they're going to spend to bring everyone together. And they're going to need to say, yes, teamwork, everybody gets that, but we're also going to land X, Y, and Z critical questions. And so there does need to be some work programmed in there. So it's a little bit about like, which is the priority for this particular event or series of events. And then from there, the programming falls out. What happens on day one, what happens on day two, what happens first, what happens second. How do we get people warmed up so we can get them actually working and thinking together when they've only done it through a screen prior? Is that kind of what you were looking for?
Yeah, well, I don't know what I was looking for. I wasn't fishing. But I think the idea around like making commitments to something and making
like a
decisions in
spiritual
some
commitment.
way. Yeah, maybe that's a better way of coming at it. So like and that form of commitment. Can you say a bit about that?
Yeah. That's a great one. And actually that can lead to what the artifact might be. There was a team that I was on when we were newly formed. We invited an illustrator to come to our session where we were putting together our mission vision statement. It was going to take, I don't know, a 2-hour workshop. But before we began, there was another 2-hour section where each one of us talked about what we felt our superpowers were, what the things were that held us back. And we had, this is going to sound kind of cheesy, but it worked. So trust me. But we had a photographer actually take our photo in what we felt was our power pose. And so for some of us, it was kind of maybe jovial and kind of comical, like a superhero farcical kind of thing. And others actually just really stood in the way that made them feel strong. And as we talked about our superpowers, the illustrator took note of what we said and kind of started drawing us. And by the time we got to the end of the day, each one of us had a representation of us in our power pose, actually like colored in with like a superhero uniform and a moniker. This person is like the matchmaker. This person is the accelerator, all these things. And we came out of the mission vision positioning exercise with a, Hall of Justice kind of super friends collection of all of us, which were then framed. And when we got back to the office, we found on our desks. So that was kind of like our spiritual galvanization experience together. And that was a pretty lo-fi one. Like that's something you can do in the office. That's even something you could do virtually if you had to. Or you can also choose a really great venue that substantiates, what you're trying to do.
I have to ask, what was yours? What was your superhero?
I was actually looking for it the other day because I couldn't find it. I normally have it around me. I don't remember, I have to admit. It's kind of sad. It kind of destroys the whole story, doesn't it? But it's somewhere. I just got to dig it out.
All right. When you found it, you can send me a photo and I'll stick it on the next newsletter.
I can see it in my mind's eye. I remember I had short hair at the time. But it was fun. Yeah. And we all hung them on our desk.
Last thing before we wrap. Thinking about, the next phase of this, what are 2 or 3 kind of best practices or suggestions for leaders or designers or facilitators who are seeking to go and build this stuff and create something, whether it's, maybe in person, but probably in person, possibly online. What are 2 or 3 tips, sort of best practices, or maybe some whether obvious seemingly or maybe counterintuitive suggestions for greatness?
You got it. I've got 3.
Go for 3. I'm ready for 3.
The first one we've already kind of tipped into because, it is one of those obvious ones that's also really powerful. And I think it can be easily forgotten, or sometimes it's cut out due to budgetary reasons, but it's worth trying to find a way to keep it in. And that's the artifacts thing. It can be an artifact of the work you've done. So it can be like a functional, tactical thing, beautifully designed, respectfully designed, something that someone would hang on their wall or put next to their desk or keep in their bag. Show somebody else use utilitarian. That's also very valuable artifact. It could be an artifact of the play. if it's a bowling league thing, maybe everybody gets bowling shirts in the, vintage designed with everyone's names, stitched in. It could be an artifact of the feeling. If the whole thing is about acceleration, there could be an artifact that represents the feeling of acceleration. I don't know what that is off the top of my head, but it could be more like symbolic. It could even be a gift of an experience, like it's a prepaid trip to the racetrack where you can drive the car as fast as you want to, or different things like that, that are like a really special gift / artifact that someone would do on their own time as like a physical memory of what has a kinetic memory. When I was at Nike, they're notorious for making those artifacts be actual product or shoes, but not always. And it was really interesting. They're also very notorious for having these things called room drops. So you'd go to work all day, you'd go to the dinner afterwards, you'd come back to your room exhausted, and on your bed would be an artifact that captured the day and is waiting for you there. And oftentimes a handwritten note from the team leader. And it didn't have to be expensive. It didn't have to be, customized or anything, but like the handwritten note oftentimes went further than the actual object. The other thing I'd say, number 2, is this concept of kind of slow thinking. In this moment where a lot of us are working very rapidly and also in ways that we haven't worked prior to 2 years ago, it requires extra energy. It requires extra steps. It's not to be underestimated, the tension inside of our bodies when you're trying to do something professionally and expertly for the first time. And it can take a drain. There's a little bit of friction, I think, going on in all of our bodies because of this. To give the team a moment of slow thinking where you don't have to think about the deadlines, you don't have to think about the quarterly milestones, and you let your brain kind of out of its sort of like process cage and let it kind of stretch like an elastic band. An elastic band, you let go of it, it comes back to its original shape. It keeps its original shape. It can always come back, but our brains are the same way, and we don't often let ourselves stretch enough. So things that I like to embed into the work that I do with teams is to create a moment or create a module where the whole point is to actually stretch our brains into an unfamiliar shape or scope. Oftentimes I use time, thinking about if we're building a brand here and we're worried about next quarter or the next launch, let's talk about how old this brand is. Maybe it's 50 years. How do we think about the next 50 years ahead of us? What have the last 50 years gotten us to? What got us here isn't going to get us where we need to go next. So let's start thinking about what it actually takes to get to the next 50 years, what the next 50-year legacy would be like. And then when you snap back into the now, there's residue from that stretching that is now embedded in their daily work, which can be so valuable, especially when you think about things like purpose and values of a brand, building things that last, building things that live and are like static. So I love trying to do that. I just gave a presentation to the VCU Brand Center on this topic. And we analyzed the longest running, continuously running brands in the world and looked for the things that they shared as like portable lessons that you could take into brand building. It was really fun. And it was, I think, something that they hadn't had a chance to do in their normal coursework, which is much more focused on how you activate, do the work. The last thing I would say is don't be afraid. In fact, lean into bringing the outside in. A lot of times I think people say, we're doing data-driven decision making. Let's bring in a data-driven decision maker to talk to our team and tell us how they do it. And it's kind of literal, which is not wrong. But I think what is also valuable and valuable in a different way is to bring in horizontal and diagonal thinkers that create these weird sort of like crossroads and vertices that spark new ways of looking at one's own work. I remembering a workshop that I led for the Nike marketing leaders in Rome, and it happened that one of my favorite sci-fi authors and thinkers lives in the community right outside of Rome, and I was able to get him to come, and we used the concept of science fiction and design fiction to talk about the world of brand building and how this medium provides something very powerful to brands as well. And I mean, I think that was the first time we had a sci-fi author in the house. So like there's all kinds of things that you can do, but you could also bring in a chef, or you could bring in a school teacher. What does it mean to explain something to the marketplace for the first time? Let's get in a teacher who talks about how they explain a new concept to children for the first time. There's really fun sort of horizontal and lateral opportunities to bring the outside in and break our echo chamber. I'd say those three things: the artifacts, the slower thinking, and bringing the outside in are elements that I usually try to think of as ingredients. They don't work every time. They're not applicable every time, but they're some of my favorites.
I love all of those. They're great. Thank you so much for sharing those. I
Yeah.
really love all three. Speaking of bringing the outside in, it appears that some workmen have arrived and are currently drilling like directly into my house and I have not been notified. So I'm hoping it's not going to like come straight through the wall. But I feel like that is the signal that time is nigh.
That is the signal.
This has been great. Thank you so much for dropping these bombs of wisdom. Love it. This will be recorded and it will be available on our YouTube and the LinkedIn and the other places. I think we're even on Twitch because we're down like that. But thank you, Katie, for your time. This has been great. Where can people find you online? Where's the best place to hit you up, look you up, all of that good stuff?
Yeah, I have just a simple website. It's drke.co. But I'm also on Twitter. It's Katie Drakey, my name. I'm on the interwebs. You can find me without looking too hard. Yeah,
I've tried it. I can Google your name and it's ding right at the top.
There I am.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of your coffee.
Thank you. It's great to see you.
Catch you soon.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. Woo! All right. Oh my goodness, the noise is absolutely insane. I feel like that they are going to drill through my house. That is all for this time. Thank you for tuning in. It's Wavetable Groove Box, episode 3. How do I create a team offsite that hits the spot? It's definitely time for me to go and hit someone's spot on the head because they're drilling all the way through our house. Thank you again for watching. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another Q&A, some more hot and cool, possibly some back-to-back. That was our first time, so thank you to Katie for being so brave to join us. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you on the other side.